Welcome to Listening with China Blue. This is a podcast that focuses on how listening not only informs us about what is occurring in the world around us, but also helps us connect with others, build stronger businesses, strengthens our mental health, and become more creative and compassionate individuals. As more and more people practice attentive listening in a community, it becomes a community building practice that strengthens our mental health as we learn from our neighbors. I will be interviewing people from all walks of life to learn how listening has informed them in their field and helped them to make intelligent decisions. They will be artists, musicians, composers, dancers, business people, psychologists, neuroscientists, and Buddhists, to name a few. About me, I'm an internationally exhibiting sound-based artist. In my work, Discovering Unheard Sounds, I realized that the core component that drove my work was simply listening. That realization put me on the path of speaking about and helping people learn to become better listeners. I began with leading sound walks, which I continue to do in the upstate New York region, to help people learn to listen from nature. And now, tune your ears to this podcast to learn about the power of listening. And do pay attention until the end for further information on how to start your own listening practice, share it with others, and to support listening with China Blue. Today we are speaking with Michael Reiley. Michael is a producer, therapeutic musician, and meditation teacher focused on helping others to awaken their innate capacity to listen and resonate with the interconnected web of inner and outer soundscapes. Michael has dedicated more than 2 decades to a prolific career as a musician, producer, and collaborative artist. His extensive body of work includes crafting music for dance, film, and diverse applications for esteemed clients such as Alchemy of Breath, Wavepaths, and IKI Health. His creative talents have extended to sound installations, performances around the globe, and the production of over 20 albums showcasing his multifaceted contributions to the arts. Deep listening, following the lineage of the visionary Pauline Oliveros, has profoundly shaped Michael's artistic trajectory since his first project working with her in 2007. Today, Michael holds a position as a faculty member at the Center for Deep Listening at Rensselaer Polytechnic. There he leads and facilitates deep listening intensives in collaboration with a remarkable cohort of fellow deep listeners. Michael also curates a weekly meditation on sound group called Sound Songha, which seamlessly aligns with the principles of deep listening, mindfulness, music, and silence, providing a dedicated space for inner and outer exploration. Welcome, Michael. I'm so excited to have you here to speak with us. I've known you for a while as a active and engaged deep listening practitioner and instructor, and you have this long wealth of experience teaching deep listening, but I wanted to step back a few steps to introduce you by talking about your own personal deep listening path and your meeting with Pauline Oliveros so that people have a sense of how you came to the path you're on now.
Sure. Thank you, China Blue. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor seeing the previous guests that you've had. So I'll talk about my path with deep listening. So in around 2001, I would say I started meditating. I started doing what you'd call, classic kind of American style Vipassana. I bought a few books. Was just always interested in meditation, even as a child. I didn't know much about it. It wasn't part of my upbringing. Prayer was. I was raised Catholic, but I was always interested in the idea of meditating. And started slowly going on retreats. And also during this time, in my early 20s, I was a musician, semi-professional and professional musician, and I felt that they were separate worlds. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had my meditation friends I would see on retreat, or when I went to uh, Sangha, when I went to practice with other people, and then I had my musician friends, and it was. One of my friends told me about an application that was coming up that was sponsored by the Pew Charitable Trust in Philadelphia to do, I think it was 6 month long, not a residency, but basically a practice with Pauline Oliveros.
Hmm.
And I had never heard of Pauline Oliveros at that time, but my friend who worked at Pew said, "Oh, I think you should do it. I think, with your interest in meditation, your interest in music, you would really resonate with her." So that was in 2007, and I applied and was accepted. And there was a group of us, maybe 10 or 12 musicians, who had the opportunity once a month Pauline would come down from New York State to Philadelphia, and we would do deep listening practices and improvise together. And we were basically working together, uh, culminating in a concert that was held a few months later. And yeah, the day that I met Pauline was one of those pivot points in my life for sure. It was one of those junction points. If you believe in the multiverse, it was like a new path had opened up for me meeting Pauline. And I didn't really have much expectation. I researched her a bit and her music and her bio before applying. And I remember that day. So the group of musicians that we had, I believe it was all men and maybe one woman.
Mm-hmm.
And Pauline came in and she said, "Okay, well, let's improvise together." And it was a mix of acoustic instruments, I think like violin and saxophone, and I don't remember what else. There was a couple guitarists, electric guitarists. I think I was playing synthesizer. Um, but anyway, I just remember the improv we had was a lot of machismo. It was a lot of like a group of guys who didn't know each other really showing off, like playing kind of loud, not listening to each other, which is ironic, but it's just like, and it was in a big echoey space, so it was hard to hear each other. But I just remember the jam was not going anywhere, and it was just kind of cacophonous, like I said, machismo. And Pauline put down her accordion and kind of walked to the center of the room, and in classic Pauline fashion, was like, okay. And she's like, "Okay, everyone come out." And she described the tuning meditation to us and talked a bit about deep listening, but not that much, really. It was really, I think she sensed that we needed an experiential practice at this point. So she described the tuning meditation, which I don't know if you've talked about on the show, but it's a kind of improvisatory score where you alternate breaths where you're singing a pitch that someone else is singing and you're singing a pitch that no one else is singing, on alternating breaths as you walk around the space. So it really requires you to listen, and to listen in very subtle ways. And so we did the tuning meditation in this big echoey space in Philadelphia. And it was magical. And once it was over, we probably did it for 20, 30 minutes. Um, Everyone was very, very quiet. It was like the space became charged with this energy of us actually listening to each other and actually sounding with each other. And it was almost like a transmission, like they talk about in Zen, that I really understood, or at least had a glimpse of what deep listening was. So that was my first time meeting Pauline. It was a really beautiful day.
Oh, that's such a wonderful story because I spoke earlier with Lisa Kelly about
Mhm.
her um, running hundreds, as she put it, of tuning meditations. And I have never attended one, but I had heard from many people how profound the experience was. And to hear the actual participatory experience from you is just so exciting because, as you said, it it changes you. And it's one of those experiences that's hard to put into words because it's an experience.
Mhm. Yeah, it's alchemical. It's like you, you, all of Pauline, what she offered was so much about your active participation whether you're sounding or listening, you're actively participating in the experience. There was no spectators in deep
Hmm.
listening. There's no audience,
Yeah.
and that's one of the beautiful things. I think one of the many beautiful legacies of Pauline's work is that she flattened the hierarchy that existed between composer, musician, and audience, that the composer created the work, gave it to the musicians to, uh, basically represent the thoughts and wishes of the composer, and then the audience was there to receive it, and
Hmm.
they could either get it or not. It was like they were passive. But in her model, the audience is as important as the composer, because the audience, in the fact that they're listening. I have a piece of music that I wrote, called "Once You Hear This, You're Always a Part of the Song." So
Mm.
the very fact that you hear it, you're now a part of the song, and things become alive and animate in deep
Hmm.
listening.
Hmm.
There's, the 365 days of, what's the book called? 365 Days of Deep Listening, the scores for Pauline's 90th birthday that came out last year.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a living testament, because each of those scores is a portal to be done. You have to do the scores. They don't exist on the page, they exist in practice. So yeah, it was very, very wonderful for me to be able to experience the tuning meditation that day, and other practices we did over the course of those months together. Yeah, it was really planting seeds too for me,
Hmm.
because I had that experience. I had the connection with Pauline in 2007, and then I kind of lost touch with her in deep listening. I had her book, and I would sometimes return to it, and sometimes, other things, practices I was doing in my life, continuing with meditation, continuing with music, and uh, deep listening would come back kind of when it needed to, or when I needed it in my life, when an experience would happen, I would say, oh yeah, deep listening. And then it wasn't until about 10 years later that I did the online year-long certification course, and
Hmm.
started to learn more specifically about the listening, moving, and dreaming components of deep listening.
Which are vast
Hmm.
but beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, I got to know about you and your work through paying attention to all the things, the whole history of deep listening, the Deep Listening Institute, of course, Pauline, and your contributions in terms of writings, etc. But I became sort of hooked, if you will, on your Sound Songas. Um, and I wanted to talk to you in depth about those because, first, I would love for you to explain what a Sangha is so that those that don't know about it can understand where we're heading.
Yeah. So Sangha is a Pali word, and Pali is an ancient language that the original teachings of the Buddha were written in. And so it's a language that came from the area of North India. And so it's thousands of years old, and there is a written form of the language, but it was mostly a spoken language. And the teachings of the Buddha were oral transmissions, and kept alive through the retelling of the Dhamma, as it were. And I've been studying Buddhism as a Buddhist convert. I didn't grow up as a Buddhist, but I came to it, as I said earlier, through for lack of a better word, the kind of secular mindfulness schools of teachers like, Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, and not people I met in person, but I would read their books and research listen to talks by them, watch videos, things like that. And I would go to retreats, also mostly held by lay people, as they say in Buddhism, so not monks. But then eventually I started to connect more and more with monks in the Theravada tradition, and started studying and practicing, going on longer silent retreats. And so Buddhism is a big part of my life, and it's what I practice or try to practice daily.
Mm.
So, as I said earlier, Pauline, opening the door of deep listening, for me, I was able to see meditation and music as existing in the same world. And so Sound Sangha was a group that started in 2021 during the pandemic. And I had been teaching Buddhism and meditation at a place called Springboard Sangha in Philadelphia for a number of years before that. And also teaching deep listening, as you said earlier, part of the facilitators at the Center for Deep Listening. And I sensed that after we finished one of the 3 month or I think it's three or 4 month long deep listening intensives, that people were hungry for a way to kind of keep in touch with each other and continue to practice. So that combined with a lot of remote meditation groups that were popping up during the pandemic, I started Sound Sangha as a way, you know, as a way for me to experience, to continue this journey of what is the connection between meditation, mindfulness, presence, and listening. And Sound Sangha, it's not strictly always deep listening, although that's woven into it. And a lot of the people that come are coming from deep listening, but also a lot of folks come from just looking for a meditation group. And what we offer is something slightly different because almost all the sessions have a talk. The structure of it is there's a 10-minute talk in the beginning, then we meditate for 20 minutes, and then we have 20 minutes or so of discussion. And the talks are often about mindfulness related topics, but how do we use silence as a mindfulness tool? How do we use listening as a mindfulness tool? How do we listen with the heart and practice loving kindness in community? What does compassionate listening feel like? So topics like that, but then also more fun topics like can we imagine listening as animals? Or I'll get into creation myths, for example, for a class,
Mm-hmm.
or the neuroscience of listening, and just try to come up with creative ways of exploring, because I do feel that listening is meditation. Listening is being present. When we listen, we drop into the present moment. And this is what mindfulness is. Often mindfulness is practice as paying attention to the breath or the body as a way for presence. But I feel that listening, because of its very nature that you have to be in the present to listen, is a wonderful gateway into the benefits of meditation and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I, I, I was thinking about a recent sangha that you had, which still resonates, and I use that word in both definitions because it's still being carried forward in my mind as well as in my body about what lies beyond the edge of hearing. And in that particular sangha, you talked beautifully about that. And one of the points you brought up were, where were the sounds before we heard them? And can you tell a little bit more go a little bit more in depth in that? Because you also talked about the galaxies and the source of sounds.
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, China Blue. That's one of my favorite topics because it relates to a very personal experience I had. Another one of these shift moments in my life. I was on just a short 3-day meditation weekend retreat, and I was practicing listening as meditation. This was, I don't know, maybe a couple of years after I met Pauline, but before I started the formal deep listening training. And I remember it was in the meditation hall and it was in nature. So it was a very open nature. There was a lot of birds and things like that outside. And I was just paying attention to the sounds. I was paying attention to the sounds in the room, which were very subtle, and the sounds that were happening far away. So I was started to experience distant birds. As I'm in this moment, I can hear distant birds. And science tells us that the bird is vibrating the air. Let's say a bird is, 200 feet away on a tree. The bird is chirping and she's vibrating the air, and the air is coming and it's rippling and comes and touches my eardrum. But I think because I was in this meditative container of this little mini retreat, I had a shift where I felt like my consciousness was going to the bird. And so I felt a really visceral and beautiful experience of expansion that through listening, we can really feel what it feels like to be expansive, to take up this sphere around us that is listening. And recognizing that that sphere of awareness is entangled with all the other spheres of awareness, all the other people listening in the room. And so I had this it was a very non-dual sense of sound, listening, and what is listening to merging. And also on that retreat, I was really working with this experience after I had it. So the retreat was, you sit for 45 minutes, then there's 45 minutes of walking, and then you sit and you walk back and forth basically for the duration of the day. So I kept working with this, and I started to really experience my listening as limitless. And there is a limit to how far we can hear as humans. We can only hear, I don't even know what you would say, but you can hear for miles maybe if you're in an open desert and there's no sound absorption. But that's limit is only because of our sense organs. And so I had this feeling of a limitlessness of listening, that if my organs, my ears, and my sensory system was more powerful, I could listen even further away. And then I started to think about sounds of space. So a few years ago, they recorded the sounds of black holes colliding. And so that sound traveled light years and came and touched recording equipment here on Earth. So it just got me really thinking about and experiencing the expansiveness of listening. And so to get back to your question, what lies at the edge of our listening is another one of these constant inquiries we can be doing. Now, there's external hearing. There's a limitless to how far we can listen externally to distant sounds across the horizon, out into space. But there's also limitless hearing inside. And listening for me is always an experience of allowing and becoming more subtle and more soft. Because the more subtle and soft we become, the more we can notice the sounds that are occurring around us and inside of us. So koan is not part of my practice or my lineage, but for me, it's one of these phrases to sit with. What is at the edge of my listening? And like you said earlier, what is at the where was the sound before it was heard? And where did the sound go after it was heard? Is it a part of me? Is it a part of some Akashic record that I can return to through memory? And was it there all along? And it just emerged for that split second where I got to hear it, and then it receded back into where it came from.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think you know this, but I host or co-host a podcast for science and non-duality. So I know the position you're in as the interviewer, and so many times I'm interviewing someone and they go on these long tangents, and I just sit there and go, "Nice." After they go on their long tangents. So sorry if I'm going on tangents, but I'm
No,
indulging in being a
no.
guest today.
Oh my gosh, no, it's not it's not a tangent, because tangent has a negative
Right. No,
connotation
yeah.
to it. But there's so many kernels of thought that are layered one on top of the other on top of the other. And as I'm trying to hold them and sort of see them in my imagination and and kind of look at them from all these from a new from your viewpoint, your vantage point, it's kind of a mind expanding exercise for me because it's this I guess because there is no answer.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the point. Is there is no It's not where you have a question and you have an answer.
Hmm.
You have a concept that opens up an avenue of investigation.
Yeah, and we have experiences that we try to see if they match the concepts or if a new concept emerges from the experience. But it's always experiential.
Yeah.
You know, I think it has to be experiential listening.
Well, yeah, of course. In the end, it is because it involves all the senses. It's
Hmm.
not just the ears. It's not just the brain processing the concepts. It's the whole body. It's a whole body in engaged with the vibrations of the bird sounds as we hear them through our ears, but also through the surfaces of our body as our body feels the vibrations. So an all-encompassing experience for sure. Um, but there was this other topic for a prior sangha, um, which was on the topic of healing and the potential of humming
Hmm.
and its vastness, and that takes it this idea of sound into a new direction of actually healing as opposed to just the experiential part. Um, and the folding together of the idea of healing with something that is so o- considered rather mundane, I think. The idea of humming as a passive kind of as you walk along a path and you're keeping yourself company, or most people do that unless you're humming for a musical piece, which is rare. But can you expand a little bit on that and tell us what you spoke about? Because I missed that one.
Sure. Yeah, the other component of Sound Songha, which I didn't mention, is that part of my work as well is in the field of sound healing. And I use that phrase because it's known now. People have an image like, okay, somebody with bowls or koshi bells or tuning forks. But I trained as a sound healer in a program called Music for Healing and Transition program, which was therapeutic music. So it was music for people who are sick and dying.
Mhm.
And during that program, I played for people in hospice, a lot of people, and it was a very beautiful, profound period in my life where I was volunteering, playing for people who were dying. And what I was doing was, on its surface, could be called sound healing. So I was playing handpan. I had a Rav Vast drum, a little circular metal drum that has notes in it that you play percussively with your hands. But I wasn't healing in the sense that these people were on their deathbed. They weren't healing. They were, what I was doing was providing my own offering of allowing them to be at ease with what was happening and to present or to give witness with music to the sacredness of death, of their dying. And so when I talk about sound healing, I don't talk about it as medicine necessarily, as you know,
Mhm.
you have pain in your shoulder and the prescription is go see somebody with a tuning fork and they'll put it on your shoulder and it will go away. That can happen, of course, and that is a a beautiful thing that I've experienced from other people with tuning forks. But I talk about sound healing as and practice sound healing as a returning to a homeostasis, a natural state. And humming is one of the first soothing sounds that we all hear in the womb. So when we think about the way sound is mediated through the amniotic fluid in the womb, low frequencies come through and a muffled sound comes through. And the recordings that I've heard simulating that sound a lot like humming. So the sounds of the outside world are like have a low, soft edge to them. So humming is familiar in that way. It was the first soundtrack that we experienced in the womb. And it's a practice that we, like you said, people do it kind of when they're in the zone, when they're being mindless. And I mean that in a good way, when we're not preoccupied with thoughts. So we're just enjoying what we're doing. We often hum when we are cooking or
Mm-hmm.
walking along the path and there's nothing else to do. It's just a beautiful time and you're humming. There's a half remembered melody or you're creating your own melody and you're humming. But humming is also a reconnection with, I think, with the sacred, we think about Om, the sacred sound of, in Hindu cosmology, they say that Om was the primary vibration that created the universe. And Om, when we do it, when we really break apart those three syllables, the last part is a hum. So there's a whole practice, and I quoted this book by Jonathan Goldman that's called The Healing Power of Humming, I think, and I might be getting the title wrong. The Humming Effect.
Hmm.
Yeah, so he and his partner wrote this book about the healing potential of humming. Humming is a very personal experience because when we are humming, we're listening inwardly. So we're resonating our own skull, we're resonating our body through humming. And we can find those resonant pitches in our body when we hum that, as I said earlier, can bring us back to homeostasis, that can bring us back to a natural, unperturbed state. So it soothes our nervous system. It releases all sorts of calming chemicals in the body when we hum. And I think that's why we do it instinctively when we're feeling good, when we're feeling unperturbed, when we're feeling relaxed. We start to hum when we're in the zone. And that Sound Sangha in particular, I talked about that and invited people to hum during the meditation. So we did 20 minutes of humming. And I think mostly everybody did this, but I did this when I practiced, was just to hum one pitch and to find a pitch that really feels like you're vibrating your body. So maybe a lower pitch and just to stay with that pitch. And as often as you like to return to it, to just continue to hum as we meditate and listen inwardly and feel how that feels on your body. And everyone in the Sangha who did it came back and said how relaxing they felt, and they felt like, they slept had a good night's sleep or had a massage. It's kind of like massaging your organs from the inside out when we hum. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff we do at Sound Sangha.
I was trying to imagine that, and
Mhm.
I was as I was thinking about humming, trying not to hum right now. All of a sudden, I realized that my shoulders relaxed.
Mhm.
Just the thought of humming
Mhm.
and the thought of producing the sound, and I guess part of it is just because your attention goes to your body and to yourself and to the experience, and I was relaxing.
Good. Yeah, and I own Pauline's partner, the creator of the Listening in Dreams practice. So deep listening in dreams. She has a dream ritual called humming yourself to sleep, and it's just that it's delighting in vibrating our own bodies with our voice. Can be a melody, or it can just be a singular pitch, and as a way to, yeah, relax as we enter sleep and enter dreamland, and as a way to potentially activate listening as we enter dream world, as
Hmm.
Ion talks about in the listening in dreams practice.
I I was just thinking about laughter.
Mm.
Is that something that it seems like sort of not it's I don't necessarily associate it with meditation because it's an outward explosion of an expression of happiness, maybe. I guess that's as far as I went with the idea.
Mhm. My partner, my wife Monica, actually teaches laughter yoga. It's a yogic practice that I think the man's name is Madam Kataria, from India, who created this practice of laughter yoga. If he didn't create it, he's kind of one of the ambassadors of it. He brought it to the West, and yeah, it's combining breath and sound with joy, like you said, with releasing those hormones. And Laraji also, do you know Laraji, the musician? Uh,
No.
he's an ambient musician who plays, I think it's a dulcimer or a zither, one of those instruments, percussive instrument with a lot of echo and delay. His first album, or one of his first albums, he did with Brian Eno.
Mm.
And he's an awesome. I've seen him live many times, and he does laughter yoga too, and so he combines laughter with his music. So he'll be playing and he'll just get into these fits of spontaneous laughter, and using laughter in a musical way with as he plays the music. He'd be a great guest for the show, by the way, Laraji. I'll send you
Okay.
his.
That sounds, you know, when you hear somebody laughing, you cannot help but smile.
Mhm.
And just the mention of it brings a smile to my face. It's just, it's such a powerful thing to be doing. And I can't, having a musician perform with laughter sounds just wonderful.
Mhm.
But I was also thinking about, how you're talking about all these big thoughts and experiences. Um, and as a performing musician, all of this seems to be sort of like tools for your creative process.
Yes. All. What do you mean by all? You mean the practices I'm talking about in Sound Sangha is tools for the creative musician, or?
The ideas
Hmm.
and also the practices and the meditation. I do, as you said in the very beginning, you were thinking of meditation and music as in two separate categories. And what I'm proposing is that as they come together, they must help each other and merge together in a way to form a creative landscape. So I wanted to know if how that would work for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the creative process itself, and this doesn't just apply to musicians and artists, but really to everyone, because life is creation, life is co-creation. Every moment we're presented with possibilities, even, you know, uh, when we're feeling trapped by life, when we're feeling trapped by the circumstances of life, there's always a chance for creativity. And creativity, like laughter that you were bringing up earlier, is it's boundless, and it's joyful. And when we're in that creative zone, whether that's improvising, whether that's writing or cooking or organizing our closet or doing our taxes, there's always an opportunity to be creative. And it feels great when you're creative, when you're in that flow and you don't even realize in the moment you're being creative, because it's like listening, like meditation. pure creativity is dropping us so radically in the present moment. There's not even space for thought. There's not space for the
Mm-hmm.
comparing mind or the egoic mind because we're so in the zone. And then maybe whatever, a minute later or an hour later, whenever the flow stops and we catch our breath and we look back and we say, wow, that was really cool. I had no idea, uh, that I could go through the car wash and turn it into a symphony by, turning on my turn signals and my windshield wipers and honking my horn at the same time. That was really creative and that was beautiful that I did that. And so, yeah, I'm really glad that you're bringing up creativity and laughter too, because sometimes when I mention deep listening to people, people get a little serious look on their face. They're like, wow, deep. That must be really profound
I
and
know.
serious. Like you guys like go to a well and like listen into the ground. And you see, I lived in Berlin for a bit and kind of like in art music circles, people can be a little overly serious, a lot of frowning and, oh, that was good. That was a good piece. That was really rubbing, you know, ice into a microphone. That was good. And, it's sometimes it can get a little bit heavy and it can be a little bit, uh, yeah. So one of the beautiful things about Pauline and Eloise, who you just released an episode with Eloise, which was really
Mm-hmm.
nice, is that they felt that joy and celebration were as much a part of it as grief and sorrow and all of the flavors and melodies and notes and textures of life. It's what gives it its beauty is being able to experience all of these things. And so that's, I think often people get into meditation and mindfulness as a way to relieve stress and anxiety, or they feel like they're not living life to the fullest. And so they want to find some way to get out of, and, that's even in Buddhism, that's the first noble truth. There is suffering. It's this universal thing that things are unpleasant, that even pleasant things don't last forever, that, old age, sickness, and death are what we all have in common. And if we're living a good, healthy life right now, that's wonderful and beautiful, but it won't last forever. And you will get sick, you will grow old, and you will die, as we all do. So there's that in one breath, and then the next breath, there's joy because you say, and I'm here today, and life is beautiful, and it's raining and sunny at the same time here, which is cool. So listening and meditation and all of the things that we've been talking about allow us to be a part of that. And something you were saying earlier too that I wanted to come back to was that these practices in particular, I think, as opposed to what one often thinks of as meditation, where you sit in silence and stillness and become the observer and uh, identify with awareness itself, which is an important practice. I'm not diminishing that, but to recognize that your your awareness is as dynamic a part of the reality that you're experiencing as that reality itself. And so it's a very animate practice, meditation and deep listening. It's it really is the ultimate animation is recognizing that you're becoming aware of what's around you and what's inside of you is, as they say in quantum, or they've shown in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, you're altering the situation with your awareness. And so having fun with that and enjoying that you're a part of the game. You're a player in the game. You're not just a spectator.
And you weave your own web in that game too,
Hmm.
through your consciousness and through your participation and through your laughter and through all the things that you're engaged with. And also it's time based, so every moment is different.
Hmm. Yeah, even if we're connecting with a sound that seems to not change. So the hum of our refrigerator, for example, from the outside, it may seem like it never changes. It's a constant buzz that doesn't change, but it does change because our relationship with it changes. At some point, we're quiet in our kitchen and we're making tea and we notice the refrigerator. And so the sound has changed because it was there the whole time, but then we've become aware of it. And
Hmm.
we may on first listen say, oh, that's annoying. It's just this buzz that's happening all the time. But then as we start to really pay attention to it, we might notice little fluctuations in it. Maybe it pauses for a second, or maybe it changes a bit, or maybe we expand our listening and a car goes by and we notice, wow, the refrigerator is in key with that car, that they just made a chord. Or I remember a song and I think that song is in key with the refrigerator. Or we hear the buzz of that refrigerator and we start to follow the trajectory, the trail of all the people that made that buzz happen in that refrigerator, the people that built the refrigerator, the people that created the energy plant that is bringing electricity into your house, the dinosaurs that whose bones compressed to make the coal or oil that power that plant, all the people that work in the electricity plant. You know, it's like you can you can listen and go on all these different journeys, all just through that buzz, that hum of the refrigerator that we would normally ignore, or if we heard it, we'd find it annoying and wish it wasn't there.
And also, it has its own lifetime, which
Hmm.
is one that we do not normally attend to until you realize that it's not doing its job as efficiently as you
Hmm.
thought.
Yep.
And so there is that super expanded timeline, which in the case of a refrigerator is years, hopefully. But then in the case of other beings, it can be tens of thousands of years where you have a sound that's sustained over and over. Or like, oh, I remember a tsunami that was echoed around the world.
Hmm.
That was a just amazing sound. I think it wrapped around the world a couple of times, as I recall. It was
Wow.
a tsunami that hit Alaska, oh, maybe 10 years ago or so.
Mm.
So they're all, as you put it, there are all these acoustic events that are always around us, like the refrigerator. We usually ignore because, it's just a sound and it's a machine. But um, when you have showed us this wonderful example of taking your refrigerator on a mental walk, it's really quite wonderful to think of our mundane refrigerator in a very new way and give it a lot of respect. I'll bow to my refrigerator now
Yeah.
and thank it for its presence in my world.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my friends at the Sangha I mentioned earlier that I used to teach at said, everything sings a song and we just are here to listen to it. So, uh, a little girl walking down the street singing a song is singing a song. The birds are singing a song. Our refrigerator is singing a song. You know, everything is vibrating. We may, even rocks are vibrating. We just don't have subtle enough senses to perceive it, but they are vibrating and they are singing their own song. And when you talked about the tsunami wrapping around the world, it reminded me of one of my favorite topics that I tend to always bring up in Sound Song is the Big Bang, our current creation myth. And just the fact that the Big Bang happened, the current models are, I don't know, 14 billion years or some inconceivable number. And that explosion happened, that sonic boom happened, and it's never stopped. And all of these sounds that we're talking about connecting with are portals to our interconnectedness and portals to belonging, which is one of, I think, our core needs as humans is the want and the desire to belong, to feel like we're a part of something, to feel like we're integral in in a system, in a family and a community, but also to feel like we're part of something bigger, something that's going to continue after we're gone and was happening before we were here. And that's another door that's opened through this practice of listening and meditation, is that really felt sense of belonging to something that's been going on and will continue to go on, despite all of the turmoil and the poly crisis and the collapsing. And we don't know what will happen. We don't know what's going to happen with humanity, with the climate crisis. But I feel like sound and vibration are going to continue. And while we're here, let's vibrate and continue and try to create conditions so that more vibrations can continue and all of the beautiful things that we've had the privilege to experience in this lifetime continue for the next generations.
Michael, we're approaching the end of our time together as I am chewing on that. Um, and I wanted to find out if there was something in your near future that you were looking forward to that you wanted to speak about.
Yes. So as summertime, I'm engaged a lot with local events that are happening here where I live in Italy. There's a retreat center called Asha. So if you happen to be in Italy, I'm very active there in the summer. I'm giving concerts and sound baths and classes there. Sound Songha happens every Friday at 12 o'clock, and it's free to attend. If you go to my website, and probably be a link in the show notes to my website, you can register for free. And then I send out the link with the topic every Friday. And I do these virtual sound baths, usually twice a year on the solstice. And so this next one's going to be happening on the summer solstice. And the sound journey concert will start with a meditation. So it'll start with some of the concepts I've been talking about today, suggested ways to connect with the sound. And virtual sound baths are really great. I hadn't done them until the pandemic when there was no in-person sound baths happening, but it's obviously quite different when you're in the room at home. But one of the beautiful things at home is that you can lie in bed with your headphones or lie on your couch and just knowing that you're listening in community. So there's hopefully dozens of other people connecting live, all listening to the same thing. It charges the listening experience. And to know that someone, me, is on the other end creating this soundscape, and I use, flutes and handpan and keyboard and crystal bowls, and it's all improvised, but it's an offering that's then sent out electronically where people can listen on Zoom, and you get the recording afterwards. So that's also on my website and a way to connect with the community for a long form sound bath concert that's on the 20th of June.
I'm excited to hear and be a part of all of those, Michael. And thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward to our future ways that we will connect.
Me too. Thank you, China Blue. This has been a delight to spend this time with you and connect with your audience.
It's been a great pleasure for me too. Thank you again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Listening with China Blue. I hope it inspires you to build your own listening practice. This begins as a daily practice of attentively listening without judgment. And ask yourself, what is your version of silence? If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to chinablueart.com and please follow me on Facebook and at Instagram. Thank you.